Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Freyberg, and welcome to Lecture 8, Being Clear and Direct, Adding Meaning. Now, in Lecture 7, we focused on cutting the waste. Now we're going to build and build meaningfully with a couple of techniques. Let's dive in. So which of these thoughts have crossed your mind when you're trying to be clear and direct? Number 1, hey, at work, I have to just get to the point. I can't be all flowery and fluffy. Number 2, hey, I just cut a gazillion words from my essay based on the last lecture. Now you want me to add them back? Number 3, I'm just not good at getting my meaning across in what I write. Or number 4, I'm really bad at writing. Oh well. I think we've all been in a place where we've thought these kinds of things. Particularly number 2 here, right? Because I did just spend time teaching you how to cut meaningless words. What I want you to start adding back now, though, are words that are meaningful. Okay, so it's not just a matter of word count. It's a matter of what those words are doing. And I don't want you to be flowery and fluffy. Good writing is about being precise. That's what we're striving for. And you know what? It's just not okay for numbers 3 and 4 to just go, oh, well, I can't do it. I'm not good at this. It's going to be really important that you are good at this. You're going to find that successes come a lot easier when you can communicate and clarify your message. So let's look at a couple of techniques that are going to help you do that. There are 2 keys to clear and direct writing in terms of building meaning. We're going to work on a technique to force precision from vague and abstract terms. And we're going to show readers what you mean rather than just tell them. Okay, forcing precision from vague and abstract terms. We reach for vague terms because we feel like they're going to cover a lot of ground, when in reality, all they do is cloud your reader or your audience's vision. Okay, they can't get at what you're trying to say. Here's some vague words. Look at these words. We use them all the time, right? Technology, success, management, innovative, society, competitive, client, leadership, advantage. There's so many words that we use that mean a million things to a million people. And the trick with analysis is making sure that people are seeing and hearing what you want them to see and hear, that you're giving them the picture that you want them to see. Otherwise, they're going to put their own pictures in. Now, if we were actually working in class, and we will do this in class, I might have you go through your writing and try to identify all the vague and abstract terms that you can find. And the thing is, when we hit upon vague and abstract terms, there's nothing inherently wrong with a vague term. It's just that you have to force precision from it. You can't stop there. You have to get specific and detailed and precise about what you mean by it. And the way you do that is simply to ask who, what, when, where, why, and how questions about that vague term. And that'll press you into filling in the details and the specifics. We're going to do a couple of examples. So here's our first example. I want you to think about or identify, as you're listening to this, I'm going to read through it, and I want you to like make a note or make a tick or whatever you need to do to note any vague or abstract term that I say. Okay, here I go. In leading, a manager not only articulates a clear vision for organizational members to follow, but also energizes and enables organizational members so that they understand the part they play in achieving organizational goals. Leadership depends on the use of power, influence, vision, persuasion, and communication skills to coordinate the behaviors of individuals and groups so that their activities and efforts are in harmony. Leaders also encourage employees to perform at a high level. Now, that is a paragraph that is full of vague terms and abstractions. I wrote that, by the way. And I wrote it to be something that's really full of vague terms. And it's hard to really get a sense of what's trying to be being communicated here because everything's so vague. Let's look. What I've done here is I've highlighted in red all the vague terms from the last paragraph. And you'll see there's a lot of them. And this is not effective communication, and it's certainly not effective analytical writing. There's just so much that isn't clarified. So we've identified them. Now what do you do? Now we ask who, what, when, where, why, and how questions from any of these terms that are in red. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. In leading, what kind of leadership? Who's leading? A manager. What kind of manager? Who are we talking about? Not only articulates a clear vision, which vision? What are you talking about? For organizational members. Really? Who? Who are we talking about here? Are we talking about frontline employees? Are we talking about managers? Who are we talking about? Organizational members to follow, but also energizes. How? How are people getting energized? And enables. How are people being enabled? And we still have this weird organizational members term, so that they understand the part they play in achieving organizational goals. Which goals? Can't be vague about it. There's a vision, there are goals. What are they? Leadership, again, what kind, depends on the use of power. How? What kind of power? Influence, again, how? What do you mean by influence? Vision, again, how? Persuasion, what? And communication skills. What kind of communication skills? It's not lost on me that this is a terrible paragraph at communicating, talking about the importance of communication skills. To coordinate the behaviors, which behaviors? Of individuals, who? And groups, who? Which ones? So that their activities, again, which ones? And efforts, which efforts? Are in harmony. Leaders, again, who are we talking about? Also encourage employees. How do they do that? To perform at a high level. What level? Okay. Now, if you wanted to make this paragraph more precise, you'd start answering some of these questions as you rewrote it. Again, there's nothing wrong with an abstraction or a vague term, provided you're filling in the details for your readers, for your audience, while doing so. Let's do a more specific example. This would probably take 5 pages to be more precise about. So let's do a different example. You're going to force yourself to be more precise if you actually answer those questions. Let us see the picture that's in your head. You have a picture in your head. Be honest about it. Help us see what you see. Okay, so here's a smaller example that we can take through the process. Again, here's an original example. Again, I wrote all of these. Greece has been greatly affected. Now, again, I've highlighted here the vague terms. So Greece has been greatly affected by industry moves towards automation. 3 vague terms right there. Unemployment is expected to rise significantly. Again, how much? In the coming years. When? Industry leaders who are anticipating this shift. How? And adjusting their company's strategies. How? In what ways? Right? Lots of vagueness here. I'll tell you right now, if you have a tendency for your writing projects to end up being not as long as they're supposed to be, everything's always short and you're just making stuff up to try to fill the pages, chances are you're probably being quite vague. Look, I mean, this is 3 lines, but it's full of vagueness and it lacks precision. It doesn't lack flowery or fluffy language. It lacks details and specifics that help a reader see what you're seeing. Notice how short it is. We'll see what's going to happen to those 3 lines when we add meaningful words. Here, I revised it, and the specific terms, the details that I've added to answer those who, what, when, where, why, and how questions are now in red. The olive oil industry in Greece, so not just Greece, you're really focusing on something. If you're doing an analysis of something, you're doing an analysis of something. Be clear about what that something is. You're not going to be able to offer much insight when you're talking about things in really vague terms. Those are opposite in meaning, right? Vague and insight. Okay. So we're going to focus in on the olive oil industry. Anticipates automation will have the biggest impact on both harvesting processes and ground transportation distribution channels. That is much more specific. I can kind of see that in ways that I can't see greatly affected and industry moves. Specifically, automation is expected to increase unemployment in the industry by 65% within the next 10 years. And that's the kind of information and insight that you need to be able to contribute in your analytical work. It's not just enough to say things are going to increase, things are going to decrease. That's just stuff you're making up. You know it, we know it, everybody knows it, and it's just to get an assignment out of the way. This second paragraph is about contributing knowledge and insight and actually having something to say. And it takes a lot more work to force yourself to be precise. Directors at Athens Oils. Okay, so we're really focusing on who those directors are, because those directors are going to have different responsibilities and visions and pressures than leaders in other industries. Help us learn about a specific industry instead of just talking vaguely about whatever. Directors at Athens Oils have already adjusted company strategy by implementing retraining options. Now, if you keep going, of course, what are those retraining options? How are they working? All sorts of stuff. But look what we've done here. We've turned 3 lines into 6 lines. And all of what we've added has been meaningful. If Josh Bernoff were here and doing his meaning ratio formula, we'd find out that these 6 lines have a really high meaning ratio. Okay, you got to make sure that whatever you are adding is detailed and specific, is illustrative, and it can help your reader to see your message, to see what's going on. You know the difference between this first paragraph and this second paragraph. Okay. Second technique I want to spend a few minutes on is this concept of show, don't tell. You may have heard instructors say that in your writing. Hey, show, don't tell. The problem is, of course, we don't spend a lot of time explaining how to do that. We don't spend a lot of time showing you how not to tell. So I want to take a couple minutes and try to show you what that looks like. All it means is you're trying to make us experience what you're writing about. And by the way, this was a UK France study abroad student in the School of Business, and we are on the London Eye in London, and we're way up high on this big Ferris wheel, and there's Big Ben, and this is Parliament, and we were exploring London down there that day, and there's a big red bus just to make it even more appropriate. How do you communicate experience? You rely on your senses. You rely on your sense of taste, hearing, touch, smell, sight. You rely on senses. And I'm going to take it. I'm not usually a big Hemingway fan, but I really enjoy this little directive here. Maybe just sit back and listen to this one. Listen now. When people talk, listen completely. Don't be thinking what you're going to say. Most people never listen, nor do they observe. You should be able to go into a room and when you come out, know everything that you saw there, and not only that. If that room gave you any feeling, you should know exactly what it was that gave you that feeling. Try that for practice. When you're in town, stand outside the theater and see how the people differ in the way they get out of taxis and take motor cars. There are 1,000 ways to practice, and always think of other people. Now, Hemingway wrote this in 1935, but it's one of the best pieces that helps me clarify showing over telling, what it means to rely on experiences and really notice things, because that's what analysis is really about. It's about noticing things and noticing patterns that might not be obvious and bringing them to the surface and then talking about why they matter. What do you notice? Don't judge, just notice and rely on your senses. So when you're telling us about an example in a paper, think about what you saw, what you could hear there, who said what, when, what happened, what did people do, who did what did you feel, what effect did it have, how could you tell? These are all ways of interrogating our senses of noticing. Let's do some examples. Okay, I know, you're hungry now, huh? We want to turn telling into showing for your audience to experience. Now, if you were telling us, you'd say the pizza was delicious. Of course it is. It's pizza. Pizza's always delicious. But if you wanted to show me, if you wanted to make me experience this pizza, you might say something like this. The fresh basil filled the air and steam rose off the crust when the pizza board hit the table. That first bite was full of salty, sweet San Marzano tomatoes. My friend's eyes widened for every bite. Look at this senses I've relied on. Fresh basil, that's going to be scent, right? Sense of smell. The steam rose. You can see steam rising. And the pizza board hit the table. You can hear the wood hitting the table. The first bite, well, that's going to be taste. Salty, sweet San Marzano tomatoes. Oh, and I can taste that right now. I can watch my friend's eyes widen for every bite. Okay. Okay, Allison, you're saying that's pizza. What about analytical writing for business? Okay. We'll try a different example. Now, in this case, if you were just telling us what's going on, you would say the leadership team was nervous. And what I would ask you is, what brought you to that decision or that conclusion that the leadership team was nervous? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you touch? What did you taste? What did you smell that led you to believe the leadership team was nervous? What was said? What wasn't said? So if I were trying to show you that, if I was trying to explain what led me to the conclusion that the team was nervous, if you wanted me to experience what you experienced, you might say something like this. At the meeting, the head of HR hesitated and cleared her throat repeatedly while explaining the report. People constantly tapped their pens on the desk and either looked at the clock or directly at their screens and notepads. There was little, if any, eye contact made. Okay, now you're relying, if we go to the head of HR hesitated and cleared her throat, that's signals that you're hearing that lead you to think that someone's nervous. People tap their pens when they're nervous, so you're hearing that and you're seeing that. And they're looking at the clock on the wall because they're looking at the time and they want the time to go by because they're nervous and they just want this to be over. And they won't look at each other because it's hard to look at each other when you're really nervous. And you're looking at your screens or your notes. And you're avoiding eye contact because all of those signals or clues lead me to believe that the leadership team was nervous. By the way, look how much longer this is than this. Do one more example. This is telling. This is sort of announcing your conclusion, really. The emotional labor performed working at Amazing Beverages R Us was exhausting. Every day, employees were pushed beyond their limits. It was too much for employees to bear, so there was high turnover. Now, initially, this might look pretty good, right? And it's not bad, but it's not helping the audience know why you came to these conclusions. Why, what was it? What behaviors did you notice? What did you notice that signaled the employees were exhausted? What did you see and what did you experience that made you decide that they were pushed beyond their limits and that it was too much to bear? What led you to that decision? What did you notice that led you to that? And if you explain that, then you're showing. Here's how I rewrote it. Employees at Amazing Beverages R Us are exhausted from emotional labor. 12-hour shifts are required, causing people to nap during breaks, move slowly, and vent to each other in whispers loud enough for customers to hear. Can you see that? Can you hear that? Are you experiencing that? Customers shout demands while employees smile through fed-up sighs. The turnover rate of 60% in the last 6 months indicates that it's too much for employees to bear. I'm showing you what I noticed so that it's clear how I arrived at the decisions here of exhaustion, push beyond limits. So those are 3 examples of showing, turning telling into showing. You'll notice that it's a lot more precise as well, and you gain a closeness to the kind of insight that the writer is producing. So here's a quick recap. You want to force precision from vague and abstract terms by replacing those abstractions by interrogating, first identifying them, and then interrogating them with who, what, when, where, why, how questions, and then putting the details in that will help us see what you see inside those abstractions. And 2, you want to show readers what you mean, not just tell them. Help a reader experience what led you to the conclusions that you arrived at. And there's some resources for you. And that is being clear and direct, adding meaning, not just adding words, adding meaning. I'll see you in the next lecture.